I think that was one big question we wanted to raise. Are these teams legit? Like, I think Patriots, we all know, will probably be in the Super Bowl. But are 49ers more so? Are they the real deal?
And you look at the 49ers schedule, and, I mean, so far, they won at Tampa, who we now look back on and say they're very 50-50, more so a bit of a shit team. We look at the Bengals, they're 0-7 now. You look at the Steelers, they didn't have Big Ben for that game, I don't believe.
Yep, and they didn't have Big Ben, and the only reason they won was because James Conner fumbled it on his 10-yard line with a few minutes to go.
Yeah. And then they beat the Browns, who we now look at as a very 50-50 team. They need to turn their season around.
But to be fair, dominated the Browns.
Oh, yeah.
Browns only scored 3 points, and not many teams can say that. I think Patriots will even struggle to say that come next week.
Yeah, next week.
Yeah.
And, and then they beat the Rams, which obviously was surprising. Obviously, blitz the Rams, only let the Rams score 7 against them.
Yeah, which, once again, that's the thing too. The offense isn't coming together as well as a lot of would have hoped, but they are two of the strongest on paper teams offensively in the league, Rams and Browns, and they managed to keep them to 10 points combined.
That's the most impressive thing.
Yep, exactly. It doesn't seem to be who they're up against, they're winning. And I think, in my eyes, this defense is the real deal. Richard Sherman, I wasn't sure how many legs he still had after coming back this season. I wasn't sure if he was still gonna have it.
Yeah.
He seemed to be dominating. It's still such a good man-to-man shutdown cornerback, and the rest of their defensive line is so good. Yeah. Bosa, Buckner, D Fords, they're it's so strong, and it's been put together really well. And Bosa's not been a surprise, but especially that Browns game, he was so dominant.
Yeah.
I don't know if you caught it, but the pressure he was putting on Baker, which doesn't have a great O-line, but wow.
Yeah, and that's the most impressive thing. And, you look at the 49ers, they have 4 first-round picks on defensive line. And for years, even I looked at it and what are you doing? You're picking high in the lottery. Why aren't you going for a quarterback or something? And then obviously they add Jimmy G. Not this year, the year before. It was last year. Last year was Jimmy G's first year with the 49ers, wasn't it?
It was his first starting. I think they picked him up prior to that, though. Just halfway through the season.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? Yeah. And, I think the defense, interestingly enough, we speak about having a good enough defense to compete in games with a good offense. The Patriots and the Pats right now are really showing that they have elite defenses, Super Bowl winning defenses on their own potentially.
For sure.
And the worrying thing for me though with the 49ers is that obviously their schedule thus far has been very easy on them. They've had Tampa, Bengals, Steelers, Browns, Rams, Redskins. We sort of can look at all those teams now and say not a lot of those are good at stopping the run. And we look forward and they have Carolina coming up. They have the Cardinals, they have the Seahawks. They go back and face the Cardinals again. Then they have the Packers, the Ravens, the Saints, the Falcons, the Rams, and then the Seahawks again. And I really think, maybe the Rams are going to tone things up, so that next matchup will be important. I don't know how good the Seahawks are at stopping the run. Do you have...
I don't know how they're going to go. They've obviously got Jadeveon Clowney and not Frank Clark, Bobby Wagner, who are fantastic for that. But the Seahawks are very 50-50. They got absolutely dominated this week by the Ravens, which we'll probably go into a little bit later. But they can either shine and be outstanding or just not come together very well. So that's going to be really interesting, those 2 games. I think the biggest test for them is this week, though, against the Panthers.
Right.
Because the Panthers have been severely underrated with how good they are at just stopping everything. Right. The amount of takeaways they're getting, the amount they're shutting down. I think they're one of the lowest yards per carry and things. I don't have the stats in front of me, but they're incredible overall. So it's going to be a big test. But I think, going back to are they the real deal? Like I said, the defense is the real deal and the coaching is the real deal. Kyle Shanahan is phenomenal. And the way he's got this running game going, I think a big loss is in Juszczyk, their fullback. A lot of teams don't. This is one thing too, and I don't know if I said it last week or if I've said it to you at all, but it's severely underrated having a good fullback. Yeah. There are 2 teams in the entire league that run more 21 offense with 2 running backs, which one is usually the fullback, than any other team, and by a large amount. Do you want to take a guess who those 2 teams are?
It's got to be 49ers and Pats, doesn't it?
That's exactly right. It seems like they both have this same game script that just is easy play. You're defending, like you're protecting your quarterback with an extra fullback. You've got a fullback that's, leading the rush, and some of the work they do is just phenomenal. But no other team's doing it besides the 2 undefeated teams.
Yeah.
Like, surely you can have a look around and go, what are they doing right? And this is one thing that's aligning for both. So I think they are the real deal. But I think Jimmy G hasn't looked good at all. Like, I'm not sure about the stats, but I'm pretty sure he'd be very even on passing touchdowns and interceptions. Like, he's not great, but that also comes down to, like we've said, he hasn't really got the wide receivers options because he's got average with potential quarterbacks, wide receivers, but not great wide receivers. And I think Emmanuel Sanders is just another one of that. So I don't think that's really going to help him in the passing game.
Yeah, exactly. I do think they're both legit. I just think, like you said, this week will be a big test to see whether, Carolina's rush defense is actually letting up an average of, where is it? They're down here somewhere. They are the 22nd team in the league. They're letting 4.7 yards per rush attempt, I think, if I'm reading these stats correctly. But interestingly enough, they're only allowing, 4.9 yards per attempt on everything. That's on total yards on passing and rushing. So, the Carolina defense is definitely going to be a real test. If it gets to the point where Garoppolo has to play the game, I think adding Sanders helps him.
Yep.
But at the end of the day,
he's a safe option.
I think right now, it's not totally out of the question to say that this could potentially be the Super Bowl game. But I just trust the Patriots more because I know that Tom Brady can play quarterback. Garoppolo I don't trust yet.
And yet, let's talk about the Patriots for a second. A lot of people have been talking a lot of trash about Tom Brady just because he hasn't had to do much. But that's the thing. The team is so good, he hasn't had to do much.
Yeah.
And he doesn't look bad by any means. He's just playing a safe game. He's getting a lot of screen passes, a lot of quick balls out, and that's just the way Tom Brady plays. He isn't a quarterback that has a huge arm strength and throws 60-yard touchdowns.
Yeah, exactly.
That's just not him. He threw an absolute dime to Philip Dorsett in the end zone in the Jets game, but that's kind of it. He'll get one big throw, good throw, and that's all that you need from Brady.
Exactly.
But so this defense, definitely the greatest I've ever seen, and I've only watched NFL for a few years, so that's why. But they are on track to break so many records. It's not even funny. Let's look at, they've had 2 shutout games in the first 7. And, that's against the Jets and the Dolphins, which aren't the greatest opponents. But there's been no other team that's had 2 shutouts in their first 7 games since the 1940 Bears.
Wow.
They're not breaking, but matching stats that are back from the 1940s. And I can't remember what the other stat was. I can't remember if it was takeaways or it was points scored or, something along those lines. Or maybe it was just points conceded. But the only other team that's on track with them were the 1920 not even Buffalo Bills. They were the Buffalo All-Americans.
Wow.
So, that's what they're on track for. And I'll just quickly, I've got a quick list up in front of me of, some of their stats that they're on track for. Fewest points allowed. That was the 2000 Baltimore Ravens. They conceded 165. New England's on track to only concede 110 points, which is 6.9 points a game. Not even a touchdown. Fewest touchdowns allowed was the same Baltimore. Defense, which only conceded 18. And so far, I think they've only conceded 2 offensive touchdowns. Then there's, interceptions. They're up there. They're not meeting records, which was San Diego with 49 interceptions in 1961.
Yeah.
New England are on track for 41, but just, another 4 interceptions against Sam Darnold. Just their defense is incredible, whether they're in zero blitz, which was a lot of the pressure they put on Sam Darnold, which is you don't have a safety. You just add an extra man to the blitz and put so much pressure on. That's where they dominated. But yeah, fewest yards allowed. They're on track to do that. Just getting there. Fewest rushing touchdowns, fewest passing touchdowns. Like, they're just, any record there is to break, they're breaking it. And, just a side note, for anyone who's interested in fantasy, the record for the most points scored by a defense and special teams was 1985, the Chicago Bears, which scored 226 points. So far this season, New England, which I'm the proud owner of in my league, has scored 156 in 7 games and are on track to get 338.2, which is pretty much an extra 50% on the record that's stood since 1985. So it's a stupidly good defense.
It is. And it's
unfair having a defense this good.
No, it is. And I think that's what makes San Fran and the Pats so legit is, even though, the argument is neither of the sides have really been tested yet, I don't believe. And I do believe that. I still think the matter of the fact is, regardless of what happens, even if they haven't been tested or not, they're either conceding very low amounts or, not even conceding at all in some points. And
exactly.
At the end of the day,
they both had shutout victories.
Yeah.
I think, I can't remember what our takeaway, I don't know if you remember what it was, but we kind of had a takeaway last week of what makes a good team. This week, my takeaway is just a defense that is this good and a coaching staff. That's all it is, because that's where they dominate. And, just a really weird side note that's just a funny fact. So Washington Redskins have just, not last week, but the week before that, sacked Jay Gruden as their coaching role. Once upon a time, only a few years before, the 3 men they had in their coaching staff and didn't decide to make any of them their head coach was Kyle Shanahan, who's leading the San Francisco 49ers currently, an undefeated team, Sean McVay, who took Rams to the Super Bowl last year and one of the most popular coming up coaches, and the other one was Matt LaFleur, who's currently got Green Bay on a 5-2 or 6-1 record. 6-2 record. So, and they decide to pass them all up, get rid of them, and stick with Jay Gruden.
Yeah, it's shocking.
It's embarrassing.
But I mean, just to finish up, I think 49ers and Pats are legit. I think they are, and I think you're the same, aren't you?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think, like I said, Pats have it all, absolutely everything, and they lack slightly. 49ers lack slightly in the passing game, but they're pretty much rushing for 200 yards a game combined. If they're rushing that much, they don't need to pass.
Yeah, exactly. And I really think that's it.